stories of Kansas City nonprofits and the people behind them. Casey Cares is the intersection of the profit and nonprofit communities, making Kansas City a better place to live, work, and play. This Casey Cares segment is brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, www.kaufman.org. I'm Ruth Bombigas. Kansas City is known as a charitable town with billions of dollars involved in the sector. What else do we know about the nonprofit sector? Lots, thanks to the Midwest Center for Nonprofit Leadership. Housed at the Henry W. Block School of Management at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, the center compiles the state of Kansas City's nonprofit sector every 2 years, helping give a picture of the nonprofit landscape in the multi-county area that makes up this region. This sector at a glance holds a wealth of information to help nonprofits, their partners, and donors understand what's happened and strategically plan for the road ahead. Overseeing this massive effort is Dr. Brent, Director of the Midwest Center for Nonprofit Leadership. He's joining us for this Ask the Expert episode to talk about how the survey comes together, as well as to share some of the findings in the report and how to use them to your advantage. Welcome back, Brent. It's so great to have you.
Thanks, Ruth. Looking forward to it.
Well, we've got a whole bunch of things to talk about with this report, and an interesting report because it's really the first look post-pandemic. Dare we say that?
I know. It feels like I have some post-traumatic stress just even thinking about the pandemic. But yes, it is our first look at how our sector is growing after the pandemic.
Well, let's start at a really 30,000-foot level. And why does the center even do a report like this?
Yeah, it's one of those things where us being an academic center really marries well with, I think, the needs of the sector to think through what is our sector. And, we have great partners in the region, great consultants, great other infrastructure organizations, where this sort of basic research is not necessarily what they do. It's something that we, just being an academic center, can really knuckle down on this information. A lot of this data, too, is deep in the bowels of the IRS. And so you have to really be a data hound to want to go deep into these data files. It's something we love, and we've been doing it for many years now. And I think the real value is to look at it year on year to see how we're evolving over time.
So how does the work start on this and come together, and who's involved and engaged on your team and dealing with that big IRS?
Yeah, so we do. We have a great team here of data analysts who crack open the IRS files, and it gets a little esoteric, but for all of us in the nonprofit sector, we fill out our 990 forms every year as part of the role of being a nonprofit, to put your financial data out there for public consumption. And that's actually what we use. Now, one of the really unique aspects of our American system, a very decentralized system, is that we don't actually get our data from the IRS. We get it from the Urban Institute, which is a think tank in Washington, D.C. And for whatever deep in the history of American government, they secured the rights to get the IRS raw data. And so they process all of that data, put it up on a pretty esoteric website where we grab it and we do our analysis.
There's got to be so much stuff there. You have brilliant people, I'm sure, weeding through the weeds, as it were. So when does the process start, and how do you then make it make sense?
Yeah, exactly. So, every year we go in and the IRS drops the data every quarter. So every quarter we get new information about the U.S. and what's happening in nonprofits. And in fact, I'm going to tease just a little bit of where we're going, and I know we'll get there also. But one of our previous products was a sector at a glance report, which was a snapshot. It would say, this is where we are in 2018 or whatever the year might be. One of the real issues, though, is that our sector is changing rapidly all the time, and we want to move to a more dynamic look in leveraging a dashboard instead of a point in time way of looking at it. That being said, we still are going to produce the report, but we're going to have two products in order to assist people in understanding where we are at any point in time. But to get back to your question, Ruth, which is, hey, how do we start? We, with our analytics team, we pull down the data. If you can imagine with the 990s, and all of us have filled those out, sometimes we have CPAs fill them out. Sometimes it's a voluntary organization, a small one, where it's a board chair who's trying to figure out what this means or that means. If you can imagine, the data is what we call dirty. What that means is just, you can imagine that there's a lot of data fields that either are incorrect, they aren't filled out right. And really, there's a several-month process of us going through all of the Kansas City data and correcting all of those data fields that are wrong. It's just part of the fun, and it's also just something to say about our sector. What types of organizations are there? Many of them, so about 8,000 organizations in our region, have income less than $50,000 a year. So those are really voluntary organizations where it's a board chair sitting down trying to fill out these forms, and God bless them. I think it's absolutely wonderful labor, but there's a lot of work that goes on to get it to be usable data in the end.
You said 8,000 nonprofits,
right?
50,000 or less.
Yes. So, 7,956. So,
to be precise.
Yeah, we're very precise here at the Midwest Center, but yeah, who have income of 50,000 or less. Yeah.
All right. So let's compare that to the overall number. Give us that,
sure.
the 2022, how many nonprofits? And then we even sliced the pie even more.
Yeah, we do. So just to say that we use as our Kansas City region, we talk about the Mid-America Regional Council's region. All right.
Okay.
So this is a 9-county region. If you sort of think about our core counties right in Kansas City, we also have Douglas County, which is Lawrence. We have some Leavenworth County. So some of the more rural counties in our region also. So within that frame, we have 10,738 nonprofits. And we could go into what a nonprofit is. All I'm going to say is those are all nonprofits. So 501c3s, those are public charities. Those are usually what we talk about. 501c6s, which are membership organizations, which are an important part of our sector. And 501c4s, those are public service organizations. They're allowed to do more advocacy work than a public charity. So the lion's share of those 9,800 are public charities. So a very small amount are the others, member serving or public serving advocacy organizations.
And did we grow from 2020 to 2022? And by any kind of means? We did grow.
We are growing. And, in some ways it's really heartening, although I know for people who are watching this, it can also give you some heartburn. It's because we're all out there trying to serve our communities in one way or another. And growth is usually good, but then you think about, boy, do we, it's already hard to attract grants or contracts or philanthropy. But let's just say that between 2020 and 2022, we added 400 more nonprofits in our region.
Wow.
And actually, if we go back a little bit more, let's say to 2016, so pre-COVID, all the strange things that happened during COVID. In 2016, we had 9,200 nonprofits in our region, and now we have 10,700. So we're up 1,500 in that 5, 6, 7 year period, which I think is great, but also has implications for all of us working in this sector.
Well, I know we can't look forward to 2 more years from now when you'll repeat this, but it will be interesting to see if there's any fallout. We've talked before how there were some nonprofits that had to close doors. There were others that may have looked at merge and duplication, but this doesn't seem to reflect that, at least at this point in time. Would that be fair?
I think the real important thing in my mind is that when we sort of talk about the nonprofit sector, here at the Block School, I teach students every day. In our framing of it, it's usually those organizations that have revenue of, say, about $500,000 and above. At that level, you're able to have 4 or 5 staff at least and above. And so at that level, I think there is some anxiety about funding, especially post-COVID, once all the COVID funding sort of leaves our social economy. I think there is this productive churn, though, at the smaller end of voluntary organizations, which is good. The soccer leagues, the afternoon chess clubs, that all just represents the great things of America, not to get all apple pie about it. But the idea of in your neighborhood, you're around a kitchen table, creating these organizations, and I think that's absolutely wonderful.
So we know we have a lot. Where did we see growth, and was there any retraction at all?
Yeah. So here's, I think, something that won't surprise folks, but is important to talk about. The 2 areas where we saw the greatest growth in income were in foundations, so charitable foundations, and in healthcare, mostly hospitals. So, we working in this sector understand that deep pockets exist in those 2 areas. Not that those are easy places to be. So in foundations, for example, what we saw in our region right now, let's see, in 2020, foundations had about $7.6 billion worth of income. Let's see here. Yeah, 7.6 billion. And then keep on getting these mixed up, Ruth.
It's okay when you're dealing with billions.
It's a lot of money. No, it went up about 15% in 2 years in charitable foundations. And that's just a function really of how they invest their money. So whether it's a community foundation where it's donor advised funds where Americans are putting their money for charitable purpose, or whether it's a more traditional charitable foundation like the Kauffman Foundation, where their investments did very well in the past 2 years. I think by and large, that's good for nonprofits because it means there's more corpus to be out there to be given out as grants.
Right.
Foundation or hospitals and the healthcare sector more generally also went up about 10% in those 2 years. So again, large growth. What we find is that human services really did not grow in those 2 years. So about the same size as it was in 2020.
That's interesting. I would think that human services would have grown by virtue of going through a crisis and then coming out of a crisis. So what happened there from your wise mind?
Yeah, and I really turn it to the people in the community, in this professional community, to think about. It went from 1.18 billion to 1.23 billion. So there's a marginal increase over that period. It is sort of surprising to me too, Ruth, that it hasn't increased because of the COVID monies, the ARPA money that came through the federal government to sort of rebuild the social economy after COVID. Then we also had the PPP loans that were forgiven. I would have expected a bigger bump in that period, but we really did not see that from the 990 data.
What are some of the? Go ahead. I'm so.
No. What I would say though, to sort of think about is what happens though, even though all this money did flow through. What happens when it stops? What happens when the merry-go-round stops? So ARPA money at the end of 2025 has to be fully expended. So that will be out of our nonprofit sector. That money has gone towards housing, gone towards houselessness, gone towards general human services in our sector. And that money is all going to go away. And it really invites some real leadership questions and governance questions about what we will do when that happens.
You talk with many people. Do you think leaders in those specific nonprofits or government that touches that, are people thinking about that now? Are we maybe not? Are we behind?
So I was just talking about the leader a couple of days ago about this very subject. And she has a fantastic organization. It's grown quite rapidly. She's very aware of this. Her funding comes both from federal government, but also state money. Here in Missouri, for example, there's a very large rainy day fund that has grown at the state level over this time period. But there's real questions about what's going to happen when those state revenues start to shrink, as we're all projecting they will. So for her, but also what I've sort of seen out there in the sector is there's this push-pull. One is organizations, particularly in human services, we're very excited to expand services in COVID because this money came along. It was this unique opportunity to either broaden what you do to a broader audience or deepen what you do and to provide more wraparound services with whom you're working. And usually that involved hiring more frontline staff, counselors, professionals. The real challenge is when you invest in people, when that funding goes away, what do you do? So to get back to this leader, she was very cognizant of that, and she's been leveraging contract labor. So hiring in marketing help, hiring in back office help instead of hiring, a staff member who's going to do bookkeeping, she's hired that out because she's very cognizant that this is going to be a challenge in the next couple of years.
We're talking with Dr. Brent Never from the Midwest Center for Nonprofit Leadership, and we're talking about the nonprofit sector latest data. All right, we could go on forever and ever, and this will all be available on your website. Go ahead and give us that website so folks will know where to go and look once it's all done.
Sure. It's mcnl.org, and hop on there. You'll be able to get onto our dashboard. And the nice thing about that, Ruth, with the dashboard is you're able to play around with it. You can interact with it. You can say, I want human service organizations that have revenue under $500,000 in 2022. And it'll pull that data right for you. I hope it's a great resource for folks who are writing grants, who are writing, who are trying to communicate with their stakeholders about what their area of the sector looks like. It's free to use, free to pull the data, and hopefully a very good resource for folks.
And a lot of fun.
I hope so. I spend a lot of time clicking through here. The other feature that you weren't able to see, but we also have this for our peer cities. So we have Indianapolis, Milwaukee, Orlando, Denver. So you'll be able to not only see how you stack up here in the region, but what do Denver nonprofits look like right now? So yes, you can easily spend an hour just clicking through, seeing what you can see.
Well, I will tease one thing that I thought was kind of fun on the sneak peek that I got is there's a heat map graphic that kind of gives you a lay of the land of where the preponderance of nonprofits are, even in the metro, in the regional 9-county area. I thought that was really fun. I want to go back. You said there's this, you'll be able to compare us, Kansas City, to these other cities that are like size by population. You've looked at some of that. How do we compare in terms of like growth? And then I would say in terms of financial support of nonprofits.
Yeah, so Kansas City, I mean, again, I've been here 15 years, Ruth, and it's my place. So it's going to sound like I'm a booster for the city, and I think a lot of us are. We have a tremendously supportive philanthropic sector, foundations, for example. What I will say is that for as much as I love our sector, we are very similar to, for example, Milwaukee, Indianapolis. We have about the same size. So the way we measure it is number of nonprofits per 10,000 population. So for every 10,000 people, how many nonprofits do we have? And we actually fall right in the middle, to be absolutely honest. What you see is when you compare us to some of the southern cities, I'm thinking of Orlando, but also Phoenix, some of the Texas cities, their sectors are a lot less grown up than ours. It's just had less history. Also, if you think about how money flows, when I did a sabbatical at Arizona State, so I was in Phoenix for the year, and what they find down there, a very big city, is that when people with wealth pass away, they usually bring their money back to their original home, whether it was Chicago or Detroit or that. So what you do see is this north-south division between where sort of money goes to roost after people pass away. Anyways, what I will say is that we do have some gigantic organizations in town that often fall below the radar. People don't always understand that. One of our very largest in town is an evangelical religious organization that, from what I can tell, it's somewhat mysterious because there's not a lot of information out there about this organization. But, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars worth of money coming through this organization. Also, we have GEHA, the Government Employees Health Association. They're a nonprofit here in the region. So our numbers do skew because we have some very large organizations
Right.
that aren't very prominent except in the sectors where they operate.
I know there's a little fly in the ointment with the data.
Yeah.
I just want you to mention it. And then I would love, as we get near the end here, for you to say, okay, these numbers are out here. What should we as nonprofit folks do with this information?
So there's to get to the fly in the ointment, we're reliant on the IRS to put together the numbers to get the 990s together in a format that we can use. Because if you imagine they show up as a bunch of PDFs, we can't, look at 1.6 million across the country in PDFs. So the issue is that they are backlogged. And so, for example, we have no 2021 numbers that we can effectively use right now. So we have 2020 and we have 2022. You would have to talk to the IRS to understand where the heck 2021 went. And it's caused some angst to say, well, if you don't have an entire year, what else haven't you been counting? What is in a file drawer that we've never pulled out? But the more important question, I think, absolutely, you brought it up, Ruth, is, well, what should we take from this as nonprofit professionals? It's one data point that we should look at. Our sector is growing. We also lay over data from Giving USA, and Giving USA was here in town every summer. They come back to present the giving data. We see the top line number that I think a lot of people might have seen is that giving is down by 11%. That is the largest decrease in giving not associated with a severe recession in decades. So that is something, another data point we need to sort of think about. Individual giving is down. Foundation giving is up quite a bit. So we have more institutional money flowing through our sector, less individual money flowing through our sector. And so what I would take from all these data points is that our sector continues to, quote unquote, professionalize, for better or for worse. It means that grant writing that's professional is prized more with institutional philanthropy. With individual giving, is still a lot of money out there, but it's about how you access that in a strategic way. And then also just sort of thinking about the fact is that the money flowing through human services hasn't grown tremendously, but need continues to grow. So we have to think about the fact that government spending is down over a generation. Is probably going to continue to decrease. And so we're stretched more to meet that need. And so I want all of us in the sector to be reflective of the fact that the pie is not getting bigger, but the need is to convene these regional discussions about what that means for Kansas City and what we can do with the wealth we have within our region.
Are people knocking on doors more to foundations, given that? Is that what foundations can expect if it's not coming from the individual? I asked you a really big question at the end of the show. That was terrible.
I love it. No. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. And so we're a little bit beholden on these foundations and their strategies. And knowing several of them, they're very thoughtful about strategies. At the same time, it sort of decreases the democracy of individual giving. When it's now more professionalized, but a fewer set of hands or brains, that can change what our sector looks like, particularly those organizations $500,000 or above.
You have given us so much to think about and so much to dive in. I want to encourage everyone to go to the website and dig into that dashboard. That's going to be a lot of fun. You can play with numbers. You can look at numbers. You can have a discussion with your board, with your staff. If it's just you, set some time to think about it and be strategic and take that time for yourself and the organization. Brent, you, as always, have given us great wisdom, and we so appreciate it.
That's wonderful. And if anybody wants to reach back, we're happy to chat. Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us for KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice, produced by Charitable Communications, also a nonprofit. This KC Cares segment was brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, www.kaufman. If you'd like to be a guest on KC Cares or underwrite the work we do, please visit our website, kccaresonline.org. And spread the love. You'll find us on Facebook and Twitter at KC Cares Radio and on Instagram at KC Cares Online. Don't forget, you can catch us Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on ESPN 1510 AM and 94.5 FM. Thank you for joining us for KC Cares.